Hello BookTube, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my review of number 13 by M.R. James, which appeared in his first collection of ghost stories called Ghost Stories of Antiquary, first published in 1904. Whilst visiting Viborg in Denmark, Mr. Anderson discovers there is something more sinister than mere superstition about room number 13 in his hotel. Now, I really enjoyed this story. To me, it is sort of very similar to Karen Albrick's scrapbook, in the sense that it's a man with an academic interest looking at something in obviously a foreign town, a continental town. He comes up against something supernatural, he faces it and survives. And also, the thing he goes up against isn't necessarily a ghost, it's something more possibly demonic. That's definitely true in Karen Albrick's scrapbook, but in this one, it's possibly also true. You get very sort of hallmark elements of M.R. James stories, M.R. James ghost stories in this. First, it's being told to you by an unnamed narrator who's recounting the story that Mr. Anderson told him. Mr. Anderson is the narrator's cousin. And then you have the fact that Mr. Anderson is an academic who's in Viborg looking into the Roman Catholic history or religious history of Viborg, and he gets particularly drawn to a exchange between the bishop, the then Catholic bishop of Viborg, and the Protestant reformers over a Mr. Franken, who is suggested to be involved in all sorts of occult goings on in a house owned by the bishop. And then, of course, you have the element of Mr. Anderson being very rational about things. For example, at one point in the story, his room, which is number 14, seems to shrink at night. And he just puts it down to simply being him misremembering things or his eyes playing tricks on him. When he discovers that in fact it does shrink at night because the room number 13 appears at night, and you get this nice sense at the end, as happens with quite a few M.R. James short stories, where Mr. Anderson is a lot more accepting of superstition. And he's a lot more wary of involving himself, of people who sort of flippantly involve themselves in sort of occult matters. That's particularly true in the last paragraph of the story. Now, and I feel that this has got the right polish. This is M.R. James, as by the time he's written number 13, which almost certainly I think would have been one of those stories he told at the Chit Chat Club at Cambridge in the 1890s. My apologies for that. M.R. James has got how to write a ghost story, and it has got the polish on it that isn't there, for example, in Karen Albrick's scrapbook. And I think this is very much if you're interested in M.R. James and you want to introduce somebody to his stories, but you don't want to introduce them to the big name stories, this would be a good one to give them, because it really is sort of a classic M.R. James story, which is not as well known as the others. But I actually feel that's unfortunate, because it is a really good story. It's a really enjoyable one. Yesterday I did a live stream with Sean discussing this story and the two others we read for last week, and he says he really enjoys it, and it's really well done, and I can highly recommend it to anybody. Now I'm just going to move on to give you a short review of the adaptation. Now, it was adapted in 2006 by the BBC as a part of their long-running A Ghost Story for Christmas series. There are a few changes that are made in the story. The location is changed from Denmark to England, and it's expanded a bit, but generally the plot is roughly the same. There's another change which I don't understand why they did. It's to do with Mr. Anderson's character. In the story, though he's rational, and he's obviously somebody who doesn't put much store by superstition, he's, however, a quite genial man. So he's perfectly polite, and he has a good sort of relationship with relationship as a working relationship with both the people at the church he's dealing with, as well as with the innkeeper at his hotel. Whereas in the adaptation, where he's played by the actor Greg Wise, he is portrayed as somewhat rude, abrupt, and generally quite dismissive of things in general. It's a changing character, and I'm not sure why they did that, because it doesn't make sort of what he discovers about Room 13 any more any better, or it doesn't make the sort of his discovery of that and his fear of it sort of stronger. The effect is the same as in the story itself, in the short story. So that's one I don't quite understand. However, one thing I will say is that they get the climax of Mr. Anderson and the innkeeper and his neighbour confronting Room 13 and what's in Room 13, in number 13 I should say, quite well, because in the story it's a hand reaching out from the room trying to drag in the story's case Anderson's neighbour into the room. In the adaptation is Mr. Anderson, but both that slight change doesn't make it's a slight improvement, I think, because in the my apologies, in the original story, the threat is at one remove, whereas in the adaptation, with Mr. Anderson being the one who's grabbed by the hand that comes out of the room and tries and drags him in, it makes the threat more immediate and improves that slightly, and improves that bit very slightly. However, I think the adaptation, for all the changes they made to it, particularly to Mr. Anderson's character, is quite good, and it's well worth a find if you can find it. I know that the BFI have done recently a 2-volume Blu-ray set of all the Ghost Story for Christmas stuff, as well as We Shall Not Come to You, My Lad, which technically wasn't done for Ghost Stories for Christmas. It was done by Omnibus in the middle of spring, but it was the first proper BBC adaptation of M.R. James, and it's very much what inspired Ghost Story for Christmas, the series that was started in the early 70s. I think it was 72 that the first story came out, which was Stores of Barchester. That which I can highly recommend as well. In fact, if you get a chance to see the Ghost Stories for Christmas, really do watch them, because they are well worth watching. However, with that, I'll say goodbye, and I will see you shortly with the review of A School Story. So I'll see you momentarily.